Hello and welcome to today's Houzz webinar. How will design shape the new normal? I'm Kate Burt, a journalist who's been writing and editing stories at Houzz for around 6 years, and I recently had the opportunity to attend the Architect at Work Digital Summit, a series of 6 fascinating panel talks on different aspects of architecture and design. And today we're going to pull together the key themes from this 2-day event and share them to help you shape your ideas for 2021 and beyond. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given the continuing global health crisis, the overarching theme across the summit was well-being. Topics ranged from better offices to a rethink on retirement housing and enhanced outdoor spaces. In essence, all the talks in some way asked, how can architects and planners create spaces and communities that enrich the mental and physical health of those who use them? Here we're going to summarise some of the interesting points made across all 6 talks in answer to this big question. Almost every design decision we make as architects or interior designers is going to have some sort of impact on people's physical and mental health, says Ben Channon of Acoustics, who helps architects and builders to create well-accredited buildings, and who took part in a discussion about creating healthier offices. All the speakers across the event agreed that, on the other side of this pandemic, there will be a new normal reflected in the buildings and spaces where we work, live, and spend time together. It may not be the normal we are used to right now, one defined by masks, perspex screens, and social distancing, but more one where we've had time to reevaluate what's important. And that's really what shaped the key theme of the show, with the speakers, architects, designers, and planners answering the question, how can we design and build a healthier, happier future post-COVID? Which is exactly what we'll discuss in today's short webinar. In other words, what are the specific details that we should focus on now to make the spaces we're building work harder to boost well-being? We'll also look at the renewed importance of community in the light of the pandemic and how your architecture can help to bring people together. And finally, we'll share some thoughts on how you can cater for different end-user personality types and why this is so important. 1. Prioritising light. More than ever, we need to design in well-being at the outset and not add it as an afterthought, Ben Channon says. And light needs to be considered at the very first stages of a building's design, from where the building is placed on site to how it's orientated, right down to the specification for the windows and detailing. Ben Channon also highlights the importance of sleep on well-being and the link here to light. He cites a study that compares those working in daylight-filled offices with those in windowless basements. The former were found to get around 46 minutes more sleep each night. Over a week, he pointed out, that's almost 1 whole night's sleep. And you can just imagine the impact that could have, not just on physical, but also on mental health. In a talk about the design of Maggie Centres, light was also a focus. In these buildings, dedicated to cancer patients, the very architecture must support the users, becoming, as architect and Maggie Centre designer Abe Rogers of Abe Rogers Design puts it, the third carer. As such, every detail counts, and Abe gives the example of the loos in a Maggie Centre he designed in London, one of which is pictured here. These need to be an emotional centre, he says, not just functional rooms. As such, along with tactile polished plaster and blurred corners, the 4 loos in his building have generous light wells. Abe says there's always daylight pouring in, harnessing the power of the circadian rhythm and the power of being bathed in light. 2. Boosting ventilation. If CO2 rates are too high, it can reduce productivity, Ben Channon explains. The effects can make people feel sluggish, even to the point of feeling as if they've had a few drinks. Justin Sablich, an editor at Springwise Intelligence, describes new innovations in ventilating systems that are increasingly discreet, including one air purifier that fits behind a work of art. Naseem Kerting, head of design at the Office Group, says some of her company's buildings now include an oxygen room, which is full of plants. 3. Making even more of the great outdoors. Alfresco entertaining and bringing nature inside have been hugely popular ideas over the past year for obvious reasons, and the well-being benefits, of course, can be significant. So how did the designers see this trend taking root? Front gardens is the answer from both landscape designer Charlotte Harris of Harris Bug Studio and Nick Sell from developer Argent, which was responsible for turning London's King's Cross into a series of sociable outdoor spaces. Back gardens are not communal, Nick says. We've lost our front gardens by concreting over them, but as soon as we put green space back, the street becomes a community. Charlotte agrees, saying she sees huge potential for any outdoor space being turned into something more useful or enjoyable, especially in high-density areas. To illustrate this point, Charlotte shares a photo of her partner digging up their own concrete front garden to create a green space, which she says is perfect for a post-work G&T. This time we're experiencing now, Charlotte says, will have a deep and lasting impact. She adds that while residential garden investment has previously been seen as luxury, encouragingly, people are starting to understand the value of good landscaping. As for other emerging trends connecting us more deeply with the great outdoors, Charlotte also says she's experienced an increased client demand for sustainable and ethical materials and an interest in protecting and encouraging wildlife. Both designers also talk about the demand for all-weather flexible outdoor spaces in which we can exercise, homeschool, entertain and also relax. Having observed what's worked across his King's Cross spaces, Nick points out some key carryovers for residential gardens, including designing to create good views, incorporating undercover areas to keep spaces usable in the rain, sunny orientation of dining areas, and creating a quiet sense of seclusion. This was an interesting and very different example of making the most of nature in the design of a building. At the Maggie Centre in Oldham, seen here and created by architect Alex de Rijker of DRMM, the exterior has become part of the interior. The building, constructed on stilts to sit above a forest-like planting, is constructed around a tree, which is encircled by glass and visible from all angles inside, where it also zones in the loveliest way the open plan space. 4. Catering for introverts and extroverts. There was a big focus on getting the balance right between privacy and communality, whether in private multi-generational residences, assisted living developments, healthcare settings or offices. In the Healthy Offices talk, Rosie Haslam, Director of Research and Strategy at Space Lab, shared the findings of a study her company did where they observed people's responses to different configurations of furniture. The participants also underwent personality tests. The results showed that introverts, who draw energy from themselves, preferred to seek out layouts that provided refuge, while extroverts, who get their energy from being with others, liked open plan spaces. The key here is that the wrong layout or an inflexible setup will potentially foster anxiety in either personality type. The takeaway? The direction of any reconfiguration of a space needs to come from the users, and this theme of checking in before, during, and importantly after project completion also came up again and again as essential insight into the way forwards. This was key in the talk about improved housing options for an ageing generation. Post-COVID, care homes are looking increasingly unattractive, says Guy Flintoft, a planning director at Retirement Villages. But how to design housing that's affordable as well as inviting for those who fear losing a sense of control over their lives? Tahira Roof, an associate at architecture firm RCKA, is working on a development in Bolton Heath in Chester for the over 60s, with well-being at the heart of the design. You need to give people a choice about how they want to live their lives, she says. In her project, among other optionally sociable design details, there are communal spaces you have to go through when leaving the building. This offers opportunities for interaction without people having to go out of their way to have it. 5. Considering acoustics. Fully open plan spaces not only risk alienating introverts, they also pose challenges in a world where the video call is likely to dominate. Acoustics is key at the moment, the office group's Naseem Courting says. Naseem goes on to say that her company has invested in a lot of high-back chairs to help with Zoom calls happening next to each other. A smart solution that doesn't involve rethinking an open plan space entirely. But equally, we're all going to need more spaces where you can work in privacy. Justin Sablich says he's seen recent innovations in work pods and modular units that tick this box. For companies looking at retrofitting, these are also an interesting idea. At the Maggie Centre he designed, Alex de Rijk included a giant gliding double-lined circular curtain, pictured here, to provide a soft visual and acoustic separation as required rather than chopping up the space into separate rooms permanently. Abe Rogers, meanwhile, talks about the use of absorbing surfaces in his design to make open plan spaces work for public and private conversations alike. You don't want a dead space, he says, but you also don't want a bouncing space. It's a careful balance. 6. Building communities. From incorporating a public park or walkway into a housing development for older people, to designing buildings to help make staff feel part of a group purpose, many of the speakers also raise the importance of community, something the pandemic has highlighted. Guy Flintoff mentions an interesting trend. While retiring to the countryside was once more the idea, he says, we've seen an increased focus on towns and city suburbs as the places older people want to live. Isolation and how to avoid it has become a big focus, with people wanting to be near the shops, the library, churches, health centres and local cultural venues. Now, residential developments are literally building on this idea, and all of the speakers talked about projects where the architecture connected local communities with older residents. Tahira Root's previously mentioned Chester development, pictured here, has been planned to adhere to the new Fitwell standard, an accreditation based on environmental sustainability, well-being, transport connections, safety and landscape. The site is connected to a nearby canal towpath, which takes cyclists and pedestrians into the centre of town. Another project in Copenhagen is to be built on top of retail outlets and cafes overlooking a public square, with a nursing home and flats for young and older people mixed into the scheme, along with a nursery. Its architect, Mads Mandrup of CF Muller, says the aim was to modernise the idea of the nursing home, turning it into a home for people of different age groups, and to have the whole facility imitate existing local architecture rather than looking institutional. If you're interested in reading more about these topics, the Houzz editorial team has a wide range of content on the Houzz site. You can access it by going to the main houzz.co.uk page and selecting Stories, where you can then browse to find the sort of content you're interested in. I've listed some of our recent stories related to wellbeing above, and you can find links to these in the description of the video. And that's it for today. If you are interested in learning more about Houzz Pro, you can send an email to ukprocommunity@houzz.com, and we'll make sure to get you connected with someone from our team. Also, we would love to get your feedback on this webinar topic and presentation. Let us know if you found it useful and if it offered information you can apply to your business strategy. And if there are any other topics you'd like to suggest, please feel free to email us at int-marketing@houzz.com. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.